Hello and welcome to this video where we look at hot and cold drinks and alcohol. As you watch and listen to the video, I hope that you will learn more about these drinks, understand what's a good choice and why, and be clearer about how much you need. My aim is to help you understand how the right drinks can help you in the here and now, and how making less good choices can be less helpful. I also aim to make sure you feel understood as I touch on elements of a long-haul health journey that can make things tricky and offer some ideas that may help. As a result, I hope you will feel encouraged and empowered to make changes if you need to. So, what are we talking about? As ever, I'm referring to the Eat Well guides, and as you will see, I've put the links to all three versions of the Eat Well guide on the slide. As you can hopefully see, the drink section is in the top right-hand corner, and it shows a glass with 6 to 8 a day on it, and gives some details about drinks in the box below the glass. I'll hope to make things much clearer in a moment, but for now, may I say I hear you if you're already thinking, why 6 to 8 glasses? What size glass does it mean? Does this mean I have to drink 6 to 8 glasses of water? What about other drinks? And does it matter if I drink from mugs and cups? So let's move on, and I'll hope to make things a little clearer. So, to confirm, the Eat Well guides indicate that the drinks in this group are water, lower fat milk, which generally means skimmed or semi-skimmed milk, plain unsweetened milk alternatives, for example, plant-based milk alternatives such as soya milk, oat milk, almond milk and rice milk, sugar-free tea and coffee, and then sugar-free drinks. And by this, we're meaning those drinks that have a sweetener of some form in them rather than sugar. So, for example, think of the diet drinks such as Diet Coke, Diet Tango, Diet Lemonade, which are sometimes referred to as no sugar. Drinks described as zero drinks, for example, Coke Zero, Fanta Zero. Sugar-free squashes, cordials and juices, which interestingly may be described as no added sugar because any fruit juice naturally has some sugar, but there is a sweetener used rather than adding more sugar to increase the sweet taste. And then sugar-free energy drinks. Before we go any further, as you can see from the slide, the Vegan Eat Well guide does not include sugar-free drinks. This is because some of the ingredients in some drinks are not vegan friendly. As an extra point to note, the Vegan Eat Well guide was produced in 2020, 4 years later than the Eat Well guide and 2 years later than the Vegetarian Eat Well guide. And so the exclusion could also relate to the growing concern about what exactly is in many of these manufactured drinks. Yes, they might be low calorie or calorie free, but what actually are the ingredients? And in many cases, I suspect that the drinks would have to be described as ultra processed if you use the definition that they contain ingredients that you wouldn't find in your store cupboard at home. Finally, all guides advise us to limit fruit juice and fruit smoothies to a total of 150 millilitres per day. If you dig a bit deeper, the NHS website suggests having this 1 glass a day with a meal, and there are several good reasons for this. And just for the sake of clarity, here is a glass containing 150 ml of a juice. And yes, it's not very much. Finally, all guides advise us to limit fruit juice and fruit smoothies to a total of 150 millilitres per day. If you dig a bit deeper, the NHS website suggests having this 1 glass a day with a meal, and there are several good reasons for this. And just for the sake of clarity, here is a glass containing 150 mils of juice, and it's not very much. Before we move on, you will not be alone if you're thinking, where's the alcohol? For a whole host of reasons, not least that I mentioned it in the title of the video. No Eat Well guide includes alcohol, but I will in a little while. Let's now move on to how much should we all drink each day. Drinks provide around 70 to 80% of our water needs. The remaining 20 to 30% comes from foods such as soup or stews, some fruits and vegetables which contain a lot of water. Most healthy adults need to drink at least 1.5 to 2 litres, which is approximately 3 to 4 pints every day. An average glass or mug holds approximately 250 millilitres, so most people need to drink between 6 and 8 mugs or 6 and 8 glasses of fluid each day, hence the mythical 6 to 8 mugs. One way to describe or check whether you are drinking enough is to check the colour of your urine. It should be a light straw colour. I think this then helps you use the general guidance and tailor it to your particular situation. And I think just a point to note, I'm not sure many people will wake up in the morning with their urine this colour, and I don't think it's something you should strive to achieve. But if your urine is darker than this light straw colour from mid-morning onwards, then I would suggest you need to be looking at drinking a little more to help. And water itself is always going to be the best way to achieve this. And a final note, of course, everyone needs to drink more in hot weather, or if they are unwell, or if they are very physically active, to replace fluid that is lost due to sweating. And finally, in this section, I thought it would be helpful to look at 2 examples of glasses. Each of these contain 250 millilitres. So obviously it looks different depending on the size of glass that you're using. And of course, you will notice this depending on the size of mug that you use. So it probably is worth just measuring just once to see how much fluid you get in the mug or glass that you typically use. So where does all this leave us? What is a good choice and why? A variety of drinks can help to maintain fluid levels in the body. And really, it's a matter of personal preference. Drinking water is one of the best ways to hydrate, as it's calorie and sugar free. And then, of course, any drink where water is the main component. For example, herbal teas and unsweetened teas and coffees, with or without a splash of milk. Just a few words on teas and coffees. Yes, caffeine does have a small dehydrating effect, but in most situations, the amount of water consumed in a cup or mug of tea or coffee means that overall the body benefits from the fluid consumed. And yes, studies do show that caffeine can disrupt sleep patterns. So if you do struggle with your sleep, then it might be worth just checking how much caffeinated tea and coffee you are drinking and the time of your last caffeinated drink. There are various recommendations about how much you should have, and the timing of your last caffeinated drink. But my observation is that we are all so very different. So some people say they feel weird after one mug of coffee. Some people manage lots. Some people can't sleep if they have caffeine after midday. And some people will have double espressos after an evening meal and sleep very well. And then, as you can see in the slide beside me, milk or plant-based alternatives also provide fluid and help to maintain hydration. They are also a very good source of calcium, and I'll be looking more at milk and other sources of calcium and how much we need in another video. For most people, I would see these drinks as being something you have once a day, possibly filling the role of a nourishing snack that fills the gap. This will make sense if you've seen our first video. But what about other drinks? Firstly, may I suggest when and where you can, stop adding sugar to drinks. Yep, this is not a new message, but what might be new to you if you're trying to cut down and need an extra reason is that a teaspoon of sugar contains about 20 calories, which of course doesn't sound much. But if you have a couple of teaspoons in each hot drink and you have 5 hot drinks a day, then that's a total of 200 calories, which adds up. The next message is stop adding sweetener to drinks. Now, I appreciate that this might sound odd to you, and I must stress that at the moment it's a personal opinion. But I don't think suggesting you switch from sugar to sweeteners is actually a good idea. Now, of course, this tactic used to be a key part of dietary advice I have given over the years. So if someone needed to reduce the calories in their diet but couldn't do without the sweet taste, I would suggest trying sweeteners instead of sugar in drinks, and diet drinks instead of sugary drinks. But now, as I mentioned earlier, there is a growing concern about what is in these sweeteners. This isn't new news in itself, but for me, the current conversation and concern about ultra-processed foods has nudged me to making this somewhat bold suggestion. And then finally, no surprise, stop choosing sugary drinks and sugary fizzy drinks on a daily basis. I'm not saying stop them completely. I'm not sure that many of us could ever stick to that. But if you're thinking of a drink to give your body the fluid it needs, then these are not good choices. From what I've said already, it will not be a surprise that I'm suggesting trying to reduce the no added sugar versions of squashes or the diet drinks. Interestingly, the British Dietetic Association's fact sheet about a sustainable diet says that soft drinks and fruit juice are the third biggest contributor of dietary greenhouse gas emissions. This was news to me, and I guess it might be to you as well. The fact sheet also says that tap water remains our most sustainable source of hydration, and we should use refillable bottles if we need to. What it doesn't say, and what you might be thinking, is that many people in the UK don't like the taste of the water from their taps, hence using things like squashes to hide the taste. Later on this video, we'll look at non-squash ideas that you could try. Reducing vegetable or fruit smoothies might seem an odd thing to say as well, as they are often heralded as a brilliant way to help you eat or consume or drink your 5 a day. They do provide water and other nutrients, but can also contain free sugars. If you blend the fruit, the natural sugars are released from within the cell walls of the fruit and become free sugars. Free sugars include any added sugars, including honey and maple syrup, and are the kind we should all be cutting down on to protect our teeth, as well as lower our energy intake to help maintain a healthy weight. Even if the smoothies have some added vegetables like spinach or kale, they are still likely to be high in sugar. So, not to be avoided, but to be limited, as you might remember me saying earlier, as part of the 150 millilitres per day. Finally, and probably more obviously, do be aware that specialty hot drinks and milkshakes can be very high in calories and saturated fat. So, for example, hot chocolates with marshmallows or flavoured coffees such as hazelnut or salted caramel with cream on the top. A regular ice cream milkshake can have twice the calories of a similar sized full sugar cola drink. But with extras such as chocolate or biscuits blended in, the calories go even higher. So why is fluid important and why bother? Drinking enough fluid, but water in particular, is vital to maintain good health in the short and long term. Water is essential for our health. If you Google water and health, there are some fascinating figures to be found. So one example I found was that up to 78% of our body is made up of water. Our brain is made up of 73% water, and so is our heart. Your bones are 31% water, your muscles and kidneys are 79%, and your skin is 64%. A whopping 83% of water makes up your lungs. If we don't drink enough water, we can easily become dehydrated. And you will know this is the case if your urine is darker than the light straw colour. And even mild dehydration has consequences. When you think of those numbers I've just mentioned, some of these consequences then become quite obvious. But you won't be alone if you're thinking, I hadn't thought of that. Studies have shown links to dehydration and the following, and so it might be worth checking, am I drinking enough water, if you notice any of them. So even slight levels of dehydration can cause bad breath and a dry mouth because water is a big part of saliva. Can make you feel hungry because your body is trying to signal it's thirsty and we think it's signalling it's hungry. Contribute to constipation, trigger headaches, reduce concentration, alertness, and being dehydrated can lower your mood. It can increase fatigue, make joints feel more painful, and contribute to making you feel dizzy and lightheaded. Now, of course, some medication can cause some of these symptoms, and if you are concerned about any of these, then you should see your GP or pharmacist. But I would suggest it's worth paying attention just to see if you're dehydrated. And then, of course, a quick fix is to drink some water. Let's now move on and look at alcohol. Red wine is part of the traditional Mediterranean diet, and the Mediterranean diet is mentioned as being anti-inflammatory. So you would not be alone in thinking, great, bring on the red wine. Now, I do love a drink, but as ever, before taking the bits of a way of eating that we like, we need to remember the rest. So it's important to be clear about what the Mediterranean diet means and what it doesn't. So we just need to remember that it does refer to traditional dietary patterns of the area of the Mediterranean in the 1960s, where the diet was characterised by frugality and non-strict vegetarianism. Energy intake, balanced energy expenditure. And the accompanying lifestyle was very important and included high levels of physical activity, rest and relaxation, for example, from post-lunch siestas, and a lot of social support and relief from stress. As an aside, and many of my patients describe the same thing, although there is often a feeling of relaxation and well-being at the time, the negative consequences, even with a very small amount of alcohol, seem to be amplified the next day. So patients of mine described worsened pain, stiffness and fatigue. So much so that many described how they have given up alcohol. For them, it just wasn't worth it. But for others, and this is me too, if you are still having alcohol, then may I just confirm the current NHS guidelines. So looking at the current NHS guidelines about alcohol, as you'll see in the slide, if you don't drink alcohol, don't start. If you do drink alcohol, try to drink no more than 14 units per week on a regular basis. Do spread your drinking over 3 or more days if you regularly drink as much as these 14 units a week, which I suggest is trying to stop people saving all their units for one evening and effectively then binge drinking, which brings risk to anyone's safety, health and well-being. If you're trying to cut down, the recommendations are try to have at least 2 alcohol-free days each week, which is good for your liver, but of course can run the risk of overdoing it on the days you do drink. Looking at the units and calories and alcoholic drinks, here are a few examples beside me. May I just confirm that units are trying to be a simple way of expressing the quantity of pure alcohol in a drink. 1 unit equals 10 millilitres or 8 grams of pure alcohol, which interestingly is around the amount of alcohol the average adult can process in 1 hour. Alcohol strength is described by something called ABV and is then given a value, described as a percentage. ABV equals alcohol by volume, and so the higher the percentage, the higher the volume of alcohol. This means that a 14% wine contains more alcohol than a 12% wine, and a 5% bitter contains more alcohol than a 4% bitter. To calculate how many units in your drinks, you need to know the ABV of the drink, how much you are drinking, i.e. the volume in millilitres, and then you can perform a calculation. There are several ways to do this, but one way of doing this is here in the example beside me, which I hope helps. So for the spirit calculation that you'll see, it's the strength in ABV times the volume that someone is drinking divided by 1,000. And that gives the units, as you'll see. Hopefully, you'll agree that this isn't too tricky, but I suggest it might become more tricky after you've started to drink. So probably if you're needing to know how many units you're drinking, it's best to plan ahead and do the calculation before you start drinking. As an extra observation, I think it does seem to be becoming easier to drink more units without realising, partly because the ABV is increasing and partly because of the volume we're drinking. So as an example, if you're old enough, like me, to think back to your younger days, I'm sure you would agree that a standard wine glass used to be a fair bit smaller, and the ABV for wine used to be more in the region of perhaps 11 to 12%, rather than the 12 to 14% that is not uncommon now. If you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that I say, yes, of course they do, when we're thinking, can long-haul health conditions make it more difficult to make good choices? And you will know that I think that pain and fatigue do not help the process of change in any way whatsoever. So given that, let me just confirm some other things that might not be helping. Not feeling thirsty. I think it's fair to say that we're all up against it because our sense of thirst decreases with age, and also our sense of thirst isn't 100% reliable anyway, so we could be dehydrated and not realise. I think I'd like to say that dull days don't help. When I'm saying this, I'm thinking of the weather. I expect most of you would agree that we all feel more thirsty, or at least more likely to think, ooh, I'd like a glass of water on a hot sunny day, but it's probably not going to be your first choice on a dull, rainy morning. And I think to say as well, it's possibly just not a priority. So when pain and fatigue are ever present, I don't think there's the headspace or anything left that is remotely like motivation to drink more water or do things differently. If you do manage to make changes, especially with drinking water, you do need to be aware that initially you will probably need to pass more urine. In addition, if you've been hydrated for a while and unintentionally constipated, you may also find you pass more poo. Both of these evacuations, if I may call them that, will usually settle down to a predictable pattern. But if, for example, you are downstairs and your loo is upstairs, and if your walking has become very slow and painful, then making these extra journeys up and down the stairs may make you wonder if it's all worth it. Or worse, and I'm afraid I could report that this has happened to me, if you suffer an unintended consequence if you don't make it to the loo in time, that's not great either. Finally, I'm always acutely aware that this section of my video sounds rather depressing, or can be. But hopefully, if you're struggling to, you'll think that at least someone gets it, is daring to mention these things, and you'll know that if you are struggling, you're not struggling alone. So this leads us nicely on to, do you need to do anything? Hopefully, this video has increased your understanding about the different drinks, guided you about what is a good choice in terms of what and how much, and how water especially can help you in the here and now. For some of you, hearing this will have confirmed that you're on the right track, which is great. So if this is you, keep going. But for others, I hope you feel encouraged and empowered to give things a try, whether it's trying different drinks, drinking different amounts, or trying to drink more water. On that note, if you do need to make changes to what and how much you drink, especially water, let's take a look at what you could try. Thinking about ideas if you would like to try to drink more water, I think we firstly need to acknowledge that sometimes UK tap water doesn't taste very nice. And that leads many people down the path of buying bottled water, which is fine, but the cost can add up. Or doing anything they can to disguise the taste by adding cordials or squashes, or just buying flavoured drinks, which again is a costly option. Of course, let's also acknowledge that we are very lucky here in the UK, compared to many others in the world, that most of us have access to water most of the time that is safe to drink whenever we want it. However, if the water from your taps at home doesn't taste nice to you, let's have a look at what you could try to do to make things better. Once you start looking, there are plenty of options at different prices to help you filter your water, For example, under the sink water filters, water filter jugs, water bottles with filters. So if you can, one of these would be a strong recommendation. If you can't, is there any way that you can make your tap water taste better to you? So just some ideas. Could you experiment with the temperature? So for you, does it taste better if you boil the water first? Or perhaps if you chill it in the fridge? Could you do anything to make it taste better without resorting to squashes or cordials? So for example, does adding a slice of lemon or a slice of lime or some mint leaves help? You could do this to cold water or recently boiled water. Could you try one or some of the many herbal teas available to add flavour without adding any caffeine? There are now so many options, as I'm sure many of you know and would agree. And finally, if none of the above work for you, could you just think of a glass of water as a medicine and just have a glass of water at certain times of the day? Just drink it without focusing on the taste, but absolutely give yourself a pat on the back and then get on with your day. One more thing, do make changes gradually, especially if you're increasing the volume you drink. And do remember to try to space your drinks through the day. Please don't save up your drinks until you're about to go to sleep, or I suspect your sleep will be constantly interrupted by popping to the bathroom, and I'm sure you won't thank me for that. One more thing, and if you have seen some of my other videos, you will know that I think the phrase giving things a try is really important. Because I think that if you make this whole process one of giving things a try, then it can become a voyage of discovery rather than one of success or failure. And I think it can then move you to realising that if giving things a try doesn't work, it might just have shown you that what you are trying to do didn't work on that particular day at that particular time. I hope it will allow you to try it another time if you can. If you feel you need more personalised support to help you in your unique situation, then please do book a free discovery call. We can then see if it's something I can help you with and if an individual appointment is the best way forward for you. But finally, thank you ever so much for joining me today, and may I wish you well on the next stage of your journey.